you.
That's okay.
And I'm going to go into slideshow. There we go. Thank you, Sarah Catherine, for that introduction. As Sarah Catherine said, I'm Tracy Woods from Sustainable Jersey. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Sustainable Jersey, I'll just tell you that they're a certification program for municipalities and schools across New Jersey that helps take large sustainability ideas and break them into actions that are doable at the municipal and school district scale. And in addition to the certification program, we have tools, resources, and guidance to help municipalities and schools do these actions, and grants and funding program, and then also a peer resource program in our regional hubs program. We have participation from all over the state, including 456 participating municipalities and 352 participating school districts. And we have a whole slate of actions that spans all the aspects of sustainability, including a big energy section. And of our energy section, there are several actions that pertain to transportation and alternative fuel vehicles. And you can see those actions in that red circle there. At the top are the actions that support upgrading the municipal fleet and bringing alternative fuel vehicles into the municipal fleet. And then we also have some actions that support outreach and EV adoption in the community. And I'm going to run through these actions really quickly, probably in less detail than I normally do, because I want to make sure that we leave plenty of time to have our Q&A session and those other things that I'm looking forward to. But if you find that you have questions about these actions, I'm available to discuss any of them with you individually. So the first side of our actions are those that support the municipal fleet. And what these actions are really structured to do is to help municipalities know, what they already own in the fleet and which vehicles are being driven the most and which vehicles might be considered for retirement. And also to help them, the municipal fleet manager, understand which vehicles could be replaced with EV or other alternative fuel vehicles in a cost-effective manner. The actions pertain to all levels of the municipal fleet, including code enforcement vehicles, police fleet vehicles, the heavy-duty trucks, and bus fleet as well. The first action in that section of the actions is the fleet inventory action. And this includes a spreadsheet that was created by Sustainable Jersey to help calculate the carbon emissions of the fleet. And it does that automatically. So what you do is that yellow screen at the top on the right, you enter in all your vehicles in your municipal fleet, including their usage and fuel usage and mileage for a baseline year. And then the spreadsheet automatically calculates the carbon emissions for the fleet for that year. The first year that you do this action, it takes a lot of work, because you got to enter in all the VIN numbers and everything. But across the board, when we talk to municipalities that have done this action, they say that it really helped them understand their fleet and build their EV planning. So it's a really important action, though the first time you do it, it does take some effort. The next action we have is purchase alternative fuel vehicles. And this action awards points for the purchase of electric vehicles for the fleet, plug-in electric vehicles, and pursuit class hybrid vehicles for the police fleet. It also awards points for heavy-duty natural gas and EV vehicles. And on the school side of the certification program, we have the Sustainable Fleets for Schools action. This action awards points for alternative fuel vehicles in the school fleet, including EV buses. A couple things to know about EV buses is that they are really great at reducing the CO2 emissions, and particularly the local emissions for students, which can help reduce asthma triggering events, and they're also a lot quieter. They also are well known for having less expensive operation and maintenance. But one of the things that folks may not realize about e-buses is that over the lifetime of the vehicle, they're also cost effective. They do cost significantly more to purchase initially, But according to a 2018 U.S. Public Interest Group, U.S. Public Interest Research Group study, there was significant lifetime savings over the life of the bus. So that's a great resource. One of the funding resources that's currently available in New Jersey is the Mid-Atlantic Electric School Bus Experience Project, effectively known as MEEP. And this is awarded by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Clean Cities Coalition and other partners. It provides a free electric school bus demonstration for 6 to 8 weeks in a school district. And as part of that demonstration, they install a free level 2 charging station, which the school district gets to keep after the demonstration is over. And I put the URL for people that are interested in learning more about that program. It's running through the next 2 school years. Another resource that's available for fleet vehicles is the BPU has the Clean Fleet Electric Vehicle Incentive Program, which offers incentives for the purchase of electric vehicles for the fleet and for EV charging infrastructure. You can see at the bottom left that I have a link for that program as well. And also another resource for fleet vehicles is included in the Purchase Alternative Fuel Vehicle Action. We have our Sustainable Jersey Alternative Fuel Vehicle Procurement Guide, which has links to all the 9 vehicles that are currently available through the state purchasing contract for electric vehicles, and an overview of municipal procurement methods for electric vehicles and other types of alternative fuel vehicles. So that's a good resource as well. Now we're going to transition. So those actions that I was just talking about all support greening the municipal fleet. And now we're going to talk about supporting adoption of electric vehicles in the community. And the first action on that side of things is the Make Your Town EV Friendly action. This action requires amending the zoning ordinance to state specifically which zones are EV charging is allowed as an accessory use. And of course, we hope that will be all zones in the municipality. Another requirement for that action is that there is a plug-in electric vehicle ordinance which clarifies the design standards for EV charging spaces. And in that ordinance, you want to list any required spaces, signage, your protections for EV requirements such as bollards or wheel stops, lighting, and ADA accessibility requirements. And also there's, as part of that action, there is a requirement for first responder training for EVs. EVs are very safe, but the way that they're handled in emergencies is slightly different. And there are resources in that action that include several very low cost options for getting your municipal first responders trained to respond to EV incidents. Also included in that action is a requirement for doing a EV awareness event. And there are several options available and they're listed in the action as well. One that is a great opportunity is participating in the National Drive Electric Week. And you can see I included the link to Drive Electric Week there as well. Getting to be at time. There's also resources for EV ordinance support in that action, and a link to the New Jersey TPA Alternative Fuel Vehicle Readiness Guide. The last action I'm going to talk about today is the Public EV Charging Infrastructure Action. And this is action awards points for installing public EV charging stations. One resource that everyone should know about is the New Jersey It Pays to Plug In program. They offer incentives for public EV charging infrastructure. And another resource, and I have the link there on the bottom left. Another resource that's available through New Jersey DEP is their Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Strategic Mapping Program. This is for municipalities that may be interested in supporting DC fast charging, and it includes mapping resources to help plan for that type of EV infrastructure. And I'm going to actually talk just really quickly. I know I'm a little bit long on time, so I'll be very quick in this. But just for municipalities that are thinking about installing EV charging, there's a couple things that you can do to help reduce the cost of EV charging. And those include carefully selecting your unit, your location, and your long-term planning for EV charging. One thing that's really important to know is that there are different types of EV charging. Level 1 charging is 110 volt, and you think about that as like a standard household charging plug. And that can be used to charge vehicles overnight or over the course of a workday. There's level 2 charging, which is at a higher voltage and can charge vehicles over 6 to 8 hours, depending on the vehicle. There's also the option to have your vehicle, your EV charging equipment networked, which means that it can accept payment and record data for the entity that owns it, or non-networked, which means that it simply just connects the vehicle to the charging infrastructure. There's a cost difference for all of those levels of charging. And so you want to look at all the options and decide which one is the best fit for your needs. Also, wall-mounted units are less expensive than stand-mounted units, and dual-port chargers cost less per port. Another consideration is you want to make sure that you're locating your EV charging infrastructure near your electrical service. So that's near the electrical meter, as near as convenient, because it's quite costly to have to run the conduit over a distance, especially if you have to trench it through concrete. And also, you just want to make sure that you are including EV charging in your long-term planning. Every time you do a construction project, you should think, is this an opportunity to put in EV infrastructure? Because if you're opening, like a sidewalk or a parking lot ground, it's going to be a lot less expensive to do it at that time than as a standalone project. Anytime you're having an electrical meter serviced or upgraded, think about adding capacity for EV charging then as well. Another thing that will be very important in the near future, and RideWise recently hosted an event with PSEG talking about the incentives that will come available, is making sure that you reach out to the utility about their incentives that are available when you're planning for EV charging as well. And I just want to call out these two documents that I have linked at the bottom of the screen here. They are really useful resources for planning EV charging stations. And I think I'm going to skip past my case studies because I'm a little over on time. I just want to share with everyone that we have our Sustainable Jersey Sustainability Summit coming up in May. And we hope that you'll join us for that as well. And there is my email address, and I'll be around at the question and answer segment as well. Thank you, Sarah Catherine.
Thank you so much, Tracy. That was a lot of great information. So now we'll go into Paul's presentation on the county EV readiness or EV plan.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. Thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Paul McCall. I'm the Director of Public Works for Somerset County. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about what Somerset County has done and what we plan on doing in the future. So right now, the county does have electric vehicles. We utilize the Chevy Bolts. We use them as motor pool vehicles, and we also use them for the mailroom. Those are our two main uses. But we do them for youth services, weights and measures, OEM, and planning, who was very excited to get an electric vehicle, has a vehicle also. They utilize it, well, not necessarily during COVID, but to go to meetings in Trenton. And we found that the Chevy Bolt is very useful. Now, we do have a couple different types of charging stations. So this is what our fleet charging station looks like. We have it mounted on the outside of our building, mounted in our parking deck, so we can charge our electric vehicles. And these are not for public use. These are only for uses by county employees to charge the regular fleet vehicles. Now, we did install a public charging station in Somerville. right outside in that building you see behind. That's our jail. So we installed a charging station out there and had to work with the municipality in identifying the spot. And as you can see, Tracy had mentioned bollards and determining whether you need them or not. We did install bollards outside of ours. Here, there are 2 electric vehicle parking stations. And one thing that's important when you're installing these, not only the permitting, and I'll talk about the electrification to get the electric there also, not only the permitting, but changing the parking ordinance. So Somerville had to change their parking ordinance here to identify these spots for electric vehicle use only. And the reason they changed the ordinance is so they could attach a fine to it. So that way, if people are parked in this spot, they have parking enforcement. I don't know that every municipality has that, but the parking enforcement will come up. They actually, the first time somebody parked there was one of our corrections officers. So they did give us a heads up and say, hey, you might want to call them and tell them to move their vehicle. The next time they park there or the person parked there, they got a fine. So they do give out tickets because we had a complaint from an employee who tried to park their electric vehicle and both spots were taken by regular cars. So part of what's very important about this when you install these is that if you don't have parking enforcement, you have to have buy-in from the police. And sometimes it might be your own employees. So, you know, if they continue to park there, something has to be done. Now, I will say that I have not seen anybody parked in these spots, but people wanting to charge their electric vehicles. Now here, we had a little different situation. And as Tracy had mentioned, you want to put these charging stations as close to your meter or service as you can. What we did here is we did have to rip out sidewalk to run conduit and install this, but we did have this metered separately. And we had some people who criticized that because we're paying extra to have a meter. But I will say that when you have a jail, no one wants you to drill holes in it, to have any openings going from the inside to the outside. So instead of running that conduit, we're able to tap in outside, and it just made everyone more comfortable, meaning that we weren't doing any type of holes into the jail facility. Now, normally, if we were in an area where we could go into the building, we would do that so it becomes part of the meter on the building itself, not to put on that added extra expense. Now, for procuring these types of things, our main source, and I know Tracy had mentioned state contract for electric vehicles, our main source to acquire the charging stations and the vehicles is the ESCNJ. That's who we've utilized. It's actually out of Middlesex County. We do the resolution, obviously get governing body approval, create the PO, and contact the dealership and work with them to get the vehicles. I will say this, that the electric vehicles come a lot faster than our normal vehicles that we order. So when we've ordered the Chevy Bolts, they're in within months, where when we order big trucks that are diesel trucks, it takes about a year to get those in. So there is a difference, and you can get them. I mean, I don't know about now. We have COVID kind of put a lot of these things that we were doing on the back burner, but we were getting relatively quickly. Okay, so I mentioned about permitting. So you do need electrical permits. You can't just go ahead and install electric charging stations everywhere. We also need a building permit because we were putting in footings and slabs and bollards. So you do have to go through the municipality to get those. Now, we did in Bridgewater, which I saw the councilman was on, we installed 2 electric charging stations there. They had grant monies, and they had one for the library, which it is the county's goal to install electric charging stations at each library in the county and at their municipal building. So they had the charging stations. And what we did is, in order to get that expedited and installed, the county actually supplied the electricians to install. We ran the conduit, we mounted the charging stations. all the municipality did was supply the charging stations. The next library that was on our list was Warren Township Library, but again, COVID kicked in, and Somerset County Public Works pays a large part in responding to COVID-19. So we just have not had the opportunity to go out and continue adding charging stations, which we hope to do this year. Again, I did mention about the parking ordinance. You either have to create it or modify it. And I will say that one of the most important things, in my own personal opinion, is that you need to tie a fine into the parking ordinance for people who park illegally in electric parking spots. I've been, and not recently, but I've been to one of Rutgers buildings for meetings, and every single time I go, there is a non-electric vehicle parked in the electric vehicle only spot. Now, that isn't a parking lot. However, if you allow that to happen on parking on the street, then the people who have electric vehicles will, it's kind of, you're taking up their spot. People build that range anxiety. You have nowhere for them to plug in, and it kind of deters people from buying them. And that's in my personal opinion. Now, what is the county doing in the future? We are looking into heavy duty trucks, and Tracy did mention the difference in expense. So for our recycling trucks, we believe would be an excellent candidate for electric vehicles for the heavy duties. However, we pay $375,000 for a recycling truck. Just a cab and chassis is just a cab and chassis, no body is $375,000. So there is a large expense and a large capital investment that we'll have to do. And we do believe, like Tracy said, that over the long run, it will work. Now, our other concern that I'm sure other municipalities have is who's going to work on them. So right now, our Chevy Bolts, we do very little maintenance on, which is nice, but we can take it to the dealership. At some point, we'll have to have our mechanics trained on how to work on these vehicles because they are different than a regular vehicle. We are looking into EV buses. And again, right now, for a public transit bus, we pay $300,000. For an electric public transit bus, it's about $750,000. And we've put in for many, well, I won't say many, but a handful of grants. We keep losing out to New Jersey Transit. So I've talked to our commissioners and said, someone's got to talk to the governor and say, we can't keep losing out to New Jersey. We can't compete with them. We cannot compete with New Jersey Transit, but we need also to start utilizing this type of grant funding to help the counties, because as everybody knows, money coming in is down. And I mean, we're going to have budget cuts this year, which I'm sure most people are. But we need to get this moving forward. And we also want to look into fast chargers, especially for buses and heavy duty trucks. Now with the buses, the ones that we've seen have about a 75-mile range, which is only enough to get us through the first portion of the trip sometimes. So we'd have to charge it during, say, a split to get it out for the second. Now, as the technology grows, I'm sure that won't be a problem, but we are looking at that. And one thing I don't have on here, and this is actually from people that are employed here who want to buy EV vehicles themselves, they're waiting for SUVs. And I know Ford is coming out with some. People are more inclined to drive an SUV now with all-wheel drive than to drive a car because you sit higher when you're on the road, you feel safer. I know in my own personal life, my wife, I've tried to talk her into getting an EV, and I will say that I have a large diesel truck. I'm not going to, truth be told, I have a large diesel truck as my own personal vehicle. But, she needs a new vehicle, but she doesn't like a car. She likes to sit higher in an SUV and have all-wheel drive. So those are some of the things that we definitely have to work through as we move forward. And that's it. I'm 49 seconds over. I'm sorry if I went fast, but I know we're trying to get through this. So I will stop the share and I will be on for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. No worries about being 49 seconds over. So we do have some questions coming in. I see them in the chat, so we'll save them for our Q&A at the end. And then last we have David. So go ahead, David.
Hello, good afternoon. Everyone can see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, I'm David Coyce. I work for Hillsborough Township. I am the business advocate, sustainability director, deputy zoning officer, and whatever else they need me to work on. Really happy to be here. I'm a licensed professional planner as well, and I also serve on the board of trustees for RideWise. Just a quick little bit of history about the sustainability program in Hillsborough. It predates me. I started working in Hillsborough in 2011, and the program started in 2006. And the town has been very active, one of the first towns to receive a certification from Sustainable Jersey. And all these years later, we are the most certified town in Somerset County, and we're actually the second most certified town in the entire state of New Jersey. We're just behind Woodbridge. So where I wanted to start was from the municipal officials' perspective, and I will get to the citizen and what you can do to be engaged in this process as well. Since I am a municipal official, I thought I would talk to you a little bit about some of my experiences and kind of where we are on this really, really fascinating journey. So where do we start? Yeah, kind of everywhere, to be honest with you. It is, it's all about trying to find, it's all about timing. It's trying to find the right opportunities for different things. And really, you know, Hillsborough has been so fortunate because we've been so active with sustainability. We've had great partners all across the state, and we had an opportunity through Sustainable Jersey to be one of 6 towns to participate in this special sustainable states program, where focusing on energy. And we've had a chance to focus on EV charging stations. And the Great Plains Institute actually has been working with us, has been having webinars. It's been really incredible. And they, to kind of steal a little bit from them, these are all the categories that they kind of have set up in terms of like what you can do. So, you know, read all of them and think about like, which one to you do you think is the first one that you should do? And to be honest with you, the one that I really went towards was more of the regulation standpoint. And, but really quite honestly, and I'll go a little bit more in depth with this, you really have to kind of strategically allocate resources to work on all these things. And Sustainable Jersey has actually created a really great framework for us. And essentially it's the Make Your Town Electric Vehicle Friendly action that really kind of gave me an introduction of, okay, where do I start? And the last time that action was updated, I believe, was in 2017. And so some things have changed a little bit from there, and they have minimum standards for what you need to do. And Tracy went into detail. I want to go into a little bit of a deeper dive. So especially because as a planner, if you're going in and changing the ordinance, you really want to take advantage of the time that you're going into it. And certainly making EV charging stations and accessory use is very important. I can't emphasize it enough. One of the things that your towns really need to think about is even beyond that, is what is the process in order for electric vehicle charging stations to be installed after they are an accessory use? Is it only going to be a permit process, administrative process, or is it going to require site plan approval? Also already mentioned in these presentations was to think about parking. You really have to align it with your parking ordinance in terms of the counts and everything like that. And sometimes on the surface, it could be a little bit confusing, and some regulators might say, well, wait a second, that's taking away parking spaces, rather than thinking comprehensively and thinking about how the whole site works. So instead of letting the regulators decide or try to interpret, it's really important to go back as you're doing your planning and as you're updating your regulations and coming up with your policies, that you really connect the dots everywhere that you possibly can. So you should be thinking about it from a retrofitting standpoint, especially communicating with the property managers and landowners, especially when it comes to some of the bigger retail, big box centers, things like that, to really talk to them about opportunities and to have an easier process for them if that is right for your community. I admit every community is a little bit different, so you really have to determine what kind of guidance do you want to have on it. Do you want to rely on your officials that are going to be reviewing administratively, or do you want certain things to go to the board? The other important thing to do, especially because all this information has been coming out in 2020/now, and aligning things with the state goals. I mean, the state's been really great with setting goals and giving out money, and it gives us a really great opportunity to make sure that our goals also align with what the state is doing, and making sure that however they're defining certain things, especially when it comes to the DC fast charges and everything like that, you want to make sure that it's lining up. Communication is key. You're going to be going through this awkward phase like we are, where we technically don't have the ordinance that enables us to have electric vehicle charging stations. However, that doesn't mean that our staff has to be very, very stringent right now. So when we do have opportunities and things go to the board right now, planning board or board of adjustment, electric vehicle charging stations are being approved, which is fantastic. And we are starting to get applications in administratively as the state has been giving out grants as well to commercial properties and things like that. We have someone on this call here from Hillsborough that is actually going through the permit process right now with us. So I think being very flexible and not being too stringent, but kind of keeping an eye on things and not letting it go too far, because you do want to eventually get everything to tie together. It's kind of this interesting dance through the whole process. Communicating is just so important. Talking to the applicant, whoever's doing your staff review reports, incorporating it into that, even asking the question, do they plan on doing it? And even if they don't plan on putting electric vehicle charging stations, at least starting to get these applications, these sites to be electric vehicle ready. So to talk about some of the successes, this predated me, of course, who else but Duke Farms would be the first in Hillsborough to have electric vehicle charging stations. Really fascinating thing. When I first started working here for the town as the zoning officer in 2011, this actually bypassed me. This went directly to the building department. They had determined on their own that it was not applicable. It was an NA. So it never got zoning approval. But that's okay, because you know, at the end of the day, it's a really great thing what they did. It was a lesson learned for us. And as I had mentioned before, we do have applications that have been getting approved with electric vehicle charging stations. And one of the really neat things that happened recently is the mayor, Mayor Sean Lapani, actually attended the PSE&G webinar that everyone hosted here. And he came to me and said it was fantastic. And he's requiring or asking politely all the applicants that are coming to the planning board to include electric vehicle charging stations. So it's really, really important to have those advocates as well. Some more successes. So at the same time, while we're trying to get the regulations together, and as we have applications coming in to trying to get the word out what we'd like them to do, we also had an opportunity to apply for the It Pays to Plug In grant. We're awarded $16,000. We got 2 dual charging stations, so that's for 4 spaces, 4 vehicles. Lessons learned. Wow, what a process this has been. We're currently going through it right now. This past Tuesday, our resolution was adopted, and we're basically still at the beginning. We didn't have a lot of insight how to exactly do it. I had a random conversation with the CFO about asking, is it on the state contract? Do we belong to one of the co-ops? She did some digging, found one of the co-ops that has a state contract, and it's actually Bryan Electric. I called them next day. They came out. We walked the whole site, the municipal building here, had our in-house electricians walk around with them, and we're in the process of getting a quote. So it's very, very exciting. Unfortunately, the budget shortfalls is, certainly looming for everyone. So we're very curious to see where this goes and what the quote will be exactly. And then we'll certainly keep in mind, future partners and things like that, like the county, because we do have a library at our municipal complex as well. So let's see here. So next steps, we got to draft an ordinance. While our regulators are being great and really working closely with all the applicants, we have to get it. We have to get it right. When it comes to the grant, we're administering it, and I'm very optimistic how that will go. We're gearing up for community education and outreach, and certainly we're gonna rely on this group for some help. So why keep reinventing the wheel? And then we're excited to try to align these things and get some really positive PR out to the public, when it comes to some of these really notable dates like National Electric Week. So wrapping up, the last thing I wanted to talk about is, for those of you who are on this call who are not municipal officials, if you're the engaged citizen, what can you do? Well, your role is, in my opinion, just as important as mine. Really, for anyone that has interest in this, and for your community, if you want to see electric vehicles be in your community, there's a number of things that you could do. You could take action to be a champion for these things. One, be informed. All right, you're already doing it, you're here. So congrats on that. The next thing is contact your local elected officials. Email them, call them, stop by if the COVID policies in your building, if there's a way to do it safe. Attend a public meeting, virtually or in person, depending on what's going on. Be aware of your rights as a citizen. These are public meetings. There's an opportunity to bring up things from business from the floor. You could ask questions, you can make statements and things like that. You could do that before the committee or the council, and you go to the planning board. Contact the staff. If your town has an in-house planning department or even building department, that contact the staff and try to understand what the policies are and how you could go about getting involved, and volunteer. Perhaps you live in a smaller town and they don't have as robust of a staff as, say, Hillsborough has. Well, volunteer. What's the worst thing they could do is say no. But really, quite honestly, I think your role as the engaged citizen is just as important as mine, because as you're asking these questions and bringing it to the right people, the people like me behind the scenes, this actually helps me, because it forces the elected officials and all the major players in the community to know that the question and interest is coming. And it actually makes my life a lot easier. So thank you for the opportunity.